Fishermen rescue a drowning bear. Then something bizarre happens. The Alaskan waters shimmered under the faint light of dawn as Captain Morgan steered his fishing trawler, the Aurora, into deeper seas. The crew had been restless for days, their luck with the nets running dry. But none of them could have imagined what they would encounter that morning. "Captain, something's in the water," shouted Ellis, the youngest of the crew, pointing toward a dark figure thrashing against the waves. At first, they thought it was debris or a seal struggling to stay afloat. But as they edged closer, their eyes widened in disbelief. A massive grizzly bear, its fur matted and soaked, was fighting a losing battle against the current. Morgan hesitated. They were miles from the shore, and grizzlies weren't exactly known for their gratitude. But something in the bear's panicked movements stirred a deep empathy in him. "Prepare the ropes," he barked, his voice slicing through the salty air. The crew exchanged uneasy glances before springing into action. As they worked together to haul the exhausted animal aboard, Morgan's mind raced. Why was it out here, so far from land? The bear collapsed on the deck, its chest heaving with labored breaths. For a moment, silence fell over the ship. Then it happened. The bear opened its eyes, locking onto Morgan's with an intelligence that sent a shiver down his spine. Morgan crouched, carefully observing the animal. "This isn't just some bear," he murmured, almost to himself. Ellis scoffed nervously. "What do you mean, Captain? It's huge. It could have killed us if it wanted." But Morgan shook his head. There was something deeply human in the bear's gaze, a flicker of understanding that defied explanation. As the crew secured the bear in a makeshift pen with old netting, it made no move to resist. Instead, it watched them with a strange calm, almost as if it knew it was safe. Hours passed, and the bear remained silent, save for the occasional grunt or shuffle. The crew avoided it, unsure of what to make of the bizarre situation. But as Morgan sat near the wheelhouse, nursing a coffee, he couldn't shake the feeling that their encounter was no mere coincidence. "Captain," came Ellis's voice, trembling slightly. "Oh, you need to see this?" Morgan followed Ellis to the deck, where the bear had started scratching patterns into the wooden floor. At first, it seemed random, but then the shapes began to take form, letters. "Is that writing?" Ellis whispered, his face pale. Morgan's heart raced as he stared at the crude but unmistakable word carved into the wood, "Help." The word "help" carved into the deck was enough to make even the seasoned Captain Morgan uneasy. He crouched, running his fingers over the jagged scratches. "This isn't possible," he muttered under his breath. Behind him, the crew murmured nervously, their gazes darting between the bear and their captain. Ellis, ever curious, dared to ask, "Captain, what do we do now?" Morgan stood, his jaw tightening. "We figure out what this means. No one touches the bear unless it becomes a danger. Understand?" The crew nodded, though unease hung in the air like a dense fog. As Morgan returned to the wheelhouse, the bear's eyes followed him, their intensity unnerving. It wasn't fear or aggression. It was almost as if the bear was waiting for something. Later that evening, Morgan sifted through his maps and journals, searching for an explanation. The waters where they'd found the bear were far from its natural habitat. Something had driven it into the open sea, and the captain couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't a simple accident. "What are you doing out here, big guy?" he whispered, glancing at the bear through the wheelhouse window. As the night deepened, a storm began to brew, the waves slapping harder against the hull. The bear grew restless, pacing within the pen. Ellis approached cautiously with a bucket of fish, hoping to calm the creature. "Here you go, buddy," he said, sliding the bucket under the net. The bear sniffed the fish but didn't eat. Instead, it made a low, rumbling sound and scratched at the deck again. This time, the scratches were less precise but still deliberate. Morgan, drawn by the noise, appeared with a flashlight. The new marks weren't letters but shapes, a jagged line that resembled a mountain and something that looked like a cave. "A map," Morgan whispered. "Or a warning." The bear let out a loud grunt, its body suddenly rigid. Moments later, The storm struck with full force, the ship rocking violently as thunder cracked overhead. Morgan barked orders to the crew to secure the vessel, but amidst the chaos, the bear broke free of its pen. Instead of attacking or fleeing, it moved to the edge of the deck, staring intently at the churning waters below. "What is it doing?" Ellis yelled, gripping the railing for balance. Then they saw it, a faint glow beneath the waves, growing brighter and brighter until it illuminated the stormy darkness. The glow beneath the waves pulsated like a heartbeat, casting eerie reflections across the storm-lashed deck. The bear stood frozen, its massive frame silhouetted against the strange light. Morgan gripped the railing tightly, his heart racing. "What in God's name is that?" he muttered. The rest of the crew huddled together, their eyes wide with fear and wonder. Ellis stepped forward cautiously, his voice barely audible over the howling wind. "Captain, it's almost like it's calling to the bear." Morgan shot him a skeptical glance but couldn't deny the bear's unusual focus on the light. The animal let out a guttural growl, not of anger, but of yearning, an almost mournful sound that sent chills down the spines of everyone aboard. The crew debated what to do as the storm worsened. Some wanted to turn the ship around and flee, while others argued they should investigate the light. "We're too far out to run now," Morgan finally declared. "If we leave, we might not survive the storm. And that thing might be the only clue to what's going on." The decision was made, they would follow the light. Morgan ordered the engines to slow, maneuvering the ship closer to the glowing phenomenon. The bear, as if understanding their intent, moved to the front of the deck, standing tall against the rain. It let out another low sound, this time softer, almost as if it was guiding them. As they approached, the source of the glow became clearer. It wasn't a natural phenomenon or bioluminescent marine life. It was a massive, ornate structure beneath the waves. Ellis gasped. "Is that a building?" The light emanated from what appeared to be a submerged dome, etched with intricate carvings that shimmered like gold. The storm seemed to quiet slightly, as though the ocean itself were holding its breath. Morgan stared at the strange sight, his gut telling him that whatever this was, it was tied to the bear, and to the desperate message scratched into the deck. Before anyone could react, the bear suddenly leapt from the ship into the water below, disappearing into the glowing depths. "No!" Ellis cried, leaning over the railing. But Morgan grabbed his shoulder firmly. "Wait." Moments later, the light pulsed again, brighter than ever, and the ship began to shake. From the depths came a sound, not mechanical, not animal, but something ancient and resonant, like a song echoing from the very bones of the earth. The haunting sound reverberated through the hull, leaving the crew stunned into silence. Even the storm seemed to pause, as though the ocean itself bowed to whatever had awakened. Morgan gritted his teeth, his instincts urging him to turn back, but something deep inside wouldn't let him. "Secure the lines," he barked. "We're not leaving yet." Ellis clung to the railing, his gaze fixed on the spot where the bear had vanished. "Captain, what if it doesn't come back?" he asked, his voice trembling. Morgan didn't answer. He couldn't. Every logical part of him screamed that this was madness, but the glow, the song, and the bear's inexplicable behavior suggested otherwise. Something was happening, something they were meant to witness. Minutes felt like hours as the crew braced against the lingering storm. The glow intensified, spreading tendrils of light through the dark water like veins of liquid fire. Then, without warning, the bear resurfaced. But it wasn't alone. Clutched in its powerful jaws was a small object, an artifact, glinting faintly as the bear swam toward the ship. "What is it holding?" Ellis whispered, leaning precariously over the edge. Morgan tossed a line into the water, and to everyone's astonishment, the bear caught it, allowing itself to be hoisted back aboard. Once on the deck, it dropped the artifact at Morgan's feet and shook its massive body, spraying water in all directions. The object was unlike anything the crew had ever seen, an intricately carved sphere, glowing faintly with the same ethereal light as the structure below. Symbols, ancient and unreadable, covered its surface, pulsating like a heartbeat. What is this?" Morgan murmured, picking it up carefully. The sphere was warm to the touch, its energy thrumming against his palms. The bear watched him intently, its earlier restlessness replaced by a calm, almost serene demeanor. It let out a soft growl, nudging the sphere with its nose as if urging Morgan to act. Suddenly, the ship lurched violently, throwing several crew members off their feet. The glow from the sphere surged, and the song from the depths returned, louder and more urgent. "Captain, we need to leave," Ellis shouted, his voice rising in panic. But Morgan didn't move. He could feel it now, a pull, a connection between the sphere, the bear, and the mysterious structure below. Whatever they had stumbled upon wasn't just ancient, it was alive. And it wanted something from them. The ship rocked perilously as the glow from the sphere intensified, casting eerie shadows across the crew's faces. Morgan held the artifact tightly, feeling its strange warmth seep into his skin. The bear stood beside him, calm and resolute, as though it were a sentinel guarding a sacred relic. "This thing, it's alive," Morgan whispered, his voice barely audible over the eerie hum that now surrounded them. Ellis scrambled to his feet, his face pale. "Captain, we have to throw that thing back. Whatever it is, it's not meant for us." The rest of the crew murmured in agreement, their fear mounting with every passing second. But Morgan shook his head. "Oh, this isn't a curse, it's a key." He turned to the bear, whose intelligent eyes seemed to affirm his words. The humming grew louder, vibrating through the deck as the storm resumed its assault on the vessel. The bear nudged Morgan's arm again, its gaze shifting toward the glowing structure beneath the waves. "You want us to go down there, don't you?" Morgan asked, almost incredulously. The bear let out a low growl, a sound that felt less like an animal's call and more like an affirmation. Morgan took a deep breath, his mind racing. They had no diving equipment, and the water's depth could be deadly. But the pull of the sphere was undeniable. "Ellis," Morgan said firmly, "bring me the submersible gear." Ellis froze, his eyes wide. "Captain, no. You'll never make it back. And what if that thing drags us all down?" Morgan stepped closer, his voice steely. "If we run now, we'll never know what this is, or why it chose us." Reluctantly, Ellis fetched the old, barely used diving apparatus stored below deck. Morgan strapped it on, clutching the sphere tightly. "If I don't come back, get this ship to safety," he said, meeting each crew member's eyes in turn. The bear moved to the edge of the deck, waiting for Morgan. With a final glance at his men, Morgan nodded and leapt into the glowing abyss, the bear diving in after him. As they descended, the light engulfed them, erasing all sense of time and space. The sphere pulsed rhythmically, guiding their path toward the ancient structure below. The carvings on the dome came into sharper focus, symbols and images that seemed to tell a story of creation, destruction, and something far beyond human comprehension. As Morgan reached out to touch the surface, the sphere in his hand began to vibrate, and a voice, not his own, filled his mind. "Guardian found. The journey begins." Morgan froze as the voice echoed in his mind, clear and commanding. It wasn't audible to his ears, but it resonated deep within him, as if the sphere had bypassed language entirely and spoken directly to his soul. The bear swam beside him, its movements graceful despite its size, and its gaze unwavering. For a moment, Morgan felt as though they were no longer separate entities, man and beast, but connected by some shared purpose. The dome loomed larger as they descended, its carvings alive with glowing symbols. Morgan hesitated, his lungs burning despite the oxygen supply. He reached out to touch the surface of the dome. The moment his fingers made contact, the sphere released a brilliant flash of light, enveloping them in a cocoon of warmth. Suddenly, the ocean was gone. Morgan found himself standing in a vast chamber, its walls pulsating with golden light. The water no longer surrounded him, yet he was dry, his breathing unlabored. The bear was beside him, unbothered by the sudden change in surroundings. The chamber felt alive, humming with an energy that seemed ancient yet timeless. "Where are we?" Morgan whispered, though he knew no one could answer. The symbols on the walls shifted, rearranging themselves into patterns that formed images, scenes of a world long forgotten. They depicted a great civilization, thriving in harmony with nature, guided by creatures resembling the bear. Morgan watched as the images turned darker, showing destruction and chaos. The bear beside him let out a mournful sound as the final scene appeared, a lone figure holding the sphere, standing before the same glowing dome. Morgan's chest tightened. "Is this a warning?" he asked aloud, unsure if anyone, or anything, was listening. The sphere in his hand grew warmer, and the voice returned, softer now but insistent. "The balance is broken. You are the bridge. Restore it or all will fall." The chamber began to tremble, the light dimming as cracks formed in the walls. The bear stepped forward, its eyes locked on Morgan. It nudged him gently as if urging him to act. But what was he supposed to do? The sphere pulsed again, and instinctively, Morgan raised it high. The light from the sphere shot outward, illuminating the chamber with blinding brilliance. In the next instant, Morgan was back in the water, the dome now glowing brighter than ever. The bear swam beside him, guiding him upward toward the surface. As they breached the waves, the storm had vanished, replaced by an eerie calm. The crew stood at the railing, their faces etched with a mix of relief and confusion as Morgan and the bear climbed aboard. "Captain," Ellis stammered, "what happened down there?" Morgan looked at the sphere in his hand, its light now faint but steady. "We've started something," he said quietly, his voice heavy with the weight of what he'd seen. "And there's no turning back now." The crew gathered around Morgan as he stood on the deck, dripping wet, the faintly glowing sphere cradled in his hands. The bear sat at his side like a sentinel, its presence strangely calming despite its immense size. "You have to tell us what's going on, Captain," Ellis pleaded. "We can't just sail blind into whatever this is." Morgan hesitated, searching for the right words. "Down there," he began, his voice low and steady, "there's something ancient. Something that's been waiting for all of us. It showed me a vision of balance lost and devastation to come if we fail." The words felt heavy, even as they left his mouth. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. "Us? What do you mean us?" one of the crew members, Tate, asked. "We're just fishermen, Captain. We're not heroes." Morgan's jaw tightened. "Maybe we're not, but we were chosen. This bear, this ship, this crew. The sphere wants us to act. I don't know how or why, but running isn't an option anymore." Ellis stepped forward, his fear mingled with determination. "So, what do we do? What's the next step?" Morgan looked down at the sphere, its light pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. "The dome is just the beginning," he said. "It's a piece of a larger puzzle. If what I saw is true, there are more of these guardians and structures out there. We have to find them." Before anyone could argue, the bear rose to its feet, letting out a deep, resonant growl. The sphere in Morgan's hand responded, glowing brighter, as if affirming the bear's urgency. At that moment, the water around the ship began to ripple unnaturally, forming circular waves that radiated outward. The crew rushed to the rails, watching in stunned silence as symbols, similar to those on the sphere, appeared on the ocean's surface, glowing with an otherworldly light. "It's a map," Morgan realized, his voice tinged with awe. The symbols marked locations across the globe, their meanings unclear but undeniable in their purpose. "This is where we go next." The crew stared at him, their fear palpable. But beneath the trepidation, there was something else, curiosity, and perhaps a spark of courage. Morgan turned to his men. "I won't force anyone to come with me. If you want to stay behind, I'll make sure you get to the nearest port. But if you're willing, we're heading into the unknown. Together." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Ellis, ever the first to act, stepped forward. "If you're going, Captain, I'm going too." One by one, the others nodded, their resolve hardening. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it as a crew. The bear let out another deep growl, and the sphere glowed brighter, its energy pulsing in time with the rippling map. Morgan gripped the helm, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Then let's not keep the world waiting. The map etched across the water faded, leaving a faint glow in Morgan's mind as if it had been burned into his memory. He stood at the helm, the crew silent behind him, the enormity of their journey sinking in. The bear sat near the bow, its eyes fixed on the horizon, as though it knew the path ahead. The first marked location wasn't far, a cluster of islands in the northern Pacific, barely visible on most maps. The aurora cut through the calm waters, the remnants of the storm far behind them. Tension hung heavy in the air, the crew glancing at one another but saying little. Ellis finally broke the silence. "So, Captain, what do we expect when we get there? Another glowing dome? More bears?" He tried to sound lighthearted, but the strain in his voice betrayed him. "I don't know," Morgan admitted, "but I've got a feeling this is bigger than anything we can imagine. The sphere, it's guiding us, and we have to trust it." He looked down at the artifact in his hand, its glow faint but steady. The warmth it emitted seemed to calm his nerves, though the weight of its purpose pressed heavily on him. Hours passed, the crew taking turns at the wheel as they approached the coordinates. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, the water grew eerily still, the air thick with anticipation. "There it is," Tate shouted, pointing ahead. A jagged island loomed in the distance, its cliffs shrouded in mist. At its center stood a towering stone monolith, carved with symbols that glowed faintly in the twilight. As the ship drew closer, the sphere in Morgan's hand grew warmer, its light pulsating in rhythm with the glowing monolith. The bear let out a low growl, rising to its feet as if sensing something beyond human comprehension. "Lower the anchor," Morgan ordered, his voice steady despite the unease gnawing at him. The crew hesitated but obeyed. The ship rocked gently as it settled near the shore. "We're going ashore," Morgan announced. "Ellis, Tate, you're with me. The rest of you stay here and keep the ship ready to move." Ellis grabbed a flashlight, his hands trembling. "And the bear?" he asked, glancing nervously at the massive animal. Morgan looked at the bear, its eyes locked on the monolith. "It's coming with us." The group climbed into the dinghy, rowing cautiously toward the island. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the faint lapping of waves against the boat. As they stepped onto the rocky shore, the sphere's glow intensified, lighting their path toward the monolith. The bear moved ahead, its steps deliberate, leading them to what felt like the heart of the island. When they reached the base of the monolith, Morgan raised the sphere, its light now blinding. The carvings on the stone came alive, shifting and rearranging until they formed a doorway. A deep rumble echoed through the ground as the doorway opened, revealing a dark passage leading into the earth. Ellis swallowed hard, his voice barely a whisper. "What now, Captain?" Morgan gripped the sphere tightly, his resolve firm. "We go in." The passage was cold and narrow, the air heavy with the scent of damp stone and something ancient, almost metallic. The bear led the way, its massive frame surprisingly agile as it moved through the dimly lit corridor. Behind it, Morgan held the sphere tightly, its pulsating light casting eerie shadows on the walls. Ellis and Tate followed closely, their breaths shallow, their footsteps echoing in the silence. "What do you think we'll find down here?" Tate whispered, his voice trembling. Ellis shot him a warning glance. "Quiet. Whatever it is, we don't want to wake it up before we're ready." Morgan didn't respond, his focus locked on the sphere and the strange pull guiding him deeper into the earth. The corridor opened into a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in darkness. At its center stood a circular dais, surrounded by 6 towering pillars etched with glowing symbols. The bear stopped at the edge of the dais, letting out a low growl that reverberated through the room. Morgan stepped forward cautiously, the sphere in his hand growing warmer with each step. As he approached the dais, the symbols on the pillars flared to life, bathing the chamber in golden light. The air buzzed with energy, the vibrations so intense that Morgan's teeth ached. He placed the sphere on the dais, and the ground beneath him trembled. The light from the pillars converged on the sphere, and a holographic image erupted from its surface, a map of the Earth marked with glowing points of light. Ellis gasped, his eyes wide. It's another map, but there are so many locations. How can we possibly reach them all? Morgan studied the map, his jaw clenched. This isn't just about us, he said. It's about restoring balance across the entire world. The chamber shuddered, and a deep, resonant voice filled the space. The first guardian has awakened. 5 remain. Seek them, or the balance will shatter. The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, its tone both commanding and mournful. Before anyone could react, the symbols on the pillars began to shift, forming images of creatures, each vastly different from the bear but equally majestic. A serpent coiled around a mountain, an eagle with wings spanning the sky, and other forms too abstract to name. Morgan's breath caught in his throat. The other guardians, he murmured. The sphere pulsed once more, and the map faded, replaced by a single glowing symbol at the edge of the dais. The bear stepped forward, nudging Morgan gently toward it. It's another key, Ellis said, his voice barely audible. We have to take it to the next location. Morgan reached out, touching the symbol. The moment his fingers made contact, a surge of energy shot through him, and the room was plunged into darkness. When the light returned, they were back on the surface, standing on the rocky shore. The monolith loomed behind them, its carvings now dark and dormant. The crew stared in stunned silence as Morgan turned to face them. The bear stood beside him, its gaze steady and unwavering. We know what we have to do, Morgan said, his voice filled with resolve. The journey isn't over. It's just beginning. Back aboard the Aurora, the crew gathered around Morgan as he laid the sphere on the navigation table. Its faint glow cast flickering shadows, illuminating their faces etched with a mix of fear and determination. The bear sat nearby, its watchful eyes fixed on Morgan as though it, too, awaited the next step. The weight of the mission settled over them like a heavy fog, but Morgan's resolve had never been stronger. The map we saw down there showed us the path, Morgan began, his voice steady. There are 5 more guardians like this one, each protecting something vital to the balance of our world. If we don't reach them, everything we know could fall apart. He paused, scanning the faces of his crew. This isn't just about us anymore. It's about everyone, everywhere. Ellis leaned forward, his brow furrowed. But Captain, we're just fishermen. How are we supposed to take on something this big? Morgan met his gaze, the weight of leadership heavy on his shoulders. Because we're the ones who were chosen. The bear, the sphere, the visions, they all led us here. Whatever force put us on this path saw something in us, and we can't ignore it. Tate spoke up, his voice tinged with doubt. What if we fail? What if we're too late? Morgan placed a hand on the sphere, its warmth grounding him. Then at least we'll know we tried. But I don't think failure is an option, not for us, not for them. He nodded toward the bear, whose calm presence seemed to embolden the crew. The sphere pulsed faintly, and the glow of the map reappeared, highlighting their next destination, a remote archipelago in the Arctic Circle. The crew exchanged nervous glances, knowing the treacherous waters and freezing temperatures they would face. But no one spoke of turning back. We'll need to stock up on supplies and reinforce the ship, Morgan said, his voice commanding. This isn't just another trip. It's a war against time and the unknown. As they prepared to set sail, the atmosphere on the ship shifted. Fear gave way to purpose, and doubt melted into determination. Each crew member took to their tasks with a newfound sense of urgency, their movements guided by the unspoken bond that had formed between them. The bear remained a constant presence, moving silently among them, its quiet strength a source of reassurance. As the Aurora left the island behind, Morgan stood at the helm, the cold wind biting his face. The sphere rested on a pedestal beside him, its light a constant reminder of the journey ahead. Ellis joined him, his expression resolute. We're really doing this, aren't we? He asked. Morgan nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. We are. And no matter what's waiting for us out there, we're not turning back. The bear let out a low, approving growl, and the sphere pulsed in response. The Aurora cut through the waves, its crew united by a purpose far greater than themselves. As they sailed toward the unknown, the weight of their mission was tempered by a single, unshakable truth: they were not alone. The journey had only just begun, but the first steps had been taken. And somewhere in the vast expanse of the world, the next guardian awaited.